Welcome to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast, where we talk about homesteading stuff and life stuff and everything in between. Join me, Amy Dingman, as we explore big questions on a little farm. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast, where we talk about life and how to live a good one. Today is January 28th, 2025, and this is episode 305. Today, we're going to talk about allowing yourself to be misunderstood and being okay with it. We're going to talk about how we don't have to explain the reason for every single little or big thing that we do. And I know that some of you out there are thinking, well, Amy, I don't really care if people understand what I do. Or, Amy, I don't really care what people think about how I come off or my reasons for stuff. But I am here today to call BS on that because I think we all have a way that we want to appear. We have things we want people to think about us, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but we also need to be okay with letting go of that a little bit. But before we get to all that, what has been happening on the lifestead? Well, I got to tell you all, I was a brave girl, and I went ice fishing this last weekend. My husband said, we're going to go ice fishing, and it's going to be awesome. And so we went to a lake about, hour and a half away, and it was delightful. I had a really good time. We didn't catch a single thing, but it was really fun. And the crazy thing is that it was super windy. It was super windy on the day we went, like crazy windy. I was afraid if we lost control of my husband's new fish. It's like a hub house, I guess he calls it. It's quilted material, and you kind of pull on the sides and it pops up, kind of like a pop-up tent kind of sort of thing. So that's what we were using. It was a 6x6, and it had ice anchors, and we had actually bought extra ice anchors, which was really ironic because the first day we went, it was so windy. And we got it all set up and everything is fine. And I was a little concerned because I kept thinking, when we go to leave the lake, when we go to take this house down, this old tent down, what if we lose control of it and it blows across the lake? We are never going to catch it. But it was super fun. It's been probably 15, 18 years since the last time I was ice fishing. We had a good time. I will do it again. I was a little like, oh, what I got on the ice. There's probably 15, 18 inches of ice out there, so I'm totally fine to be on. But there were some spots where there was no snow on it, and there is something so creepy to me about being on ice that you can not necessarily see through. I mean, you kind of can see through it, but it was good. We had a great time. So I did it. I put on my big girl pants and I went ice fishing, and I'll definitely do it a few more times before the ice is gone this year. So that is that. Along with that, we did just come out of this super huge cold snap. It was ridiculous. We had wind chills down into like 40 below. It was just crazy. So in dealing with that cold weather, your fingers can get a little cold. Your hands can get cold when you're doing chores. And some of you have emailed asking me to give an update on some new gloves that I bought. I don't know if I talked about that here in the podcast, but I did talk about it on social media. And so I had really been struggling with my hands being cold this whole winter. And that's not a problem I've ever had before. So I was like, what is going on here? But, when it would get below zero, which is pretty common here in Minnesota, my hands would just get so cold to the point that they would hurt, like literally hurt. I could not wait to get back in the house, and then they would warm up and they would hurt even more. And so I thought, I need to do something about this. And so I went and got a couple different pairs of gloves. One was Carhartt Storm Defender something or other. And then there was another Wells Lamont pair that was super, super fluffy on the inside. And so started using those. They were great. Didn't have really great dexterity for doing chores, which is super annoying to me. But if you want to have warm gloves, it's really hard to have warm gloves and have good dexterity. But then when it got on those super, super cold days, when we were down to like 40 below, wind chill, 26 below was the air temp, my hands were getting cold again. I was like, what the heck? So I decided to go back to a tip that I had heard back in the day when we first moved here from a dairy farmer who had said, what you need to do is put latex or non-latex or nitrile gloves underneath your chore gloves because that's going to keep your hands warm. And I'd used that for a long time. This year it didn't work anymore. I would put those nitrile gloves on and my hands would just be like freezing, like I could not get them to warm up. It's almost like it made it worse. And so that's when I looked for different gloves this year. I was like, what is going on? We need to figure out what's going on here. So the day that it was super, super cold, I was like, I'm going to try this nitrile glove thing again. And what I realized the problem is this year. Last fall, I think, I had moved my nitrile gloves to the garage because that's where I normally would use them when I was doing garage stuff. And so I just put them in the cabinet in the garage instead of keeping them in the house where they normally were. Well, when you put a pair of nitrile gloves or a box of nitrile gloves or latex gloves or whatever out in a garage that's not heated, where it's 26 below, they're going to get real cold and they almost freeze. Like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but like the gloves, they actually almost freeze. It's weird. And so what I was doing was I was going out there, putting on a pair of these almost frozen, crinkly gloves, and then putting my chore gloves on over those and wondering why my hands couldn't warm up. It seems like such a blonde thing to say now because now it seems obvious. Like, obviously, you have to put warm gloves on to keep your hands warm when you go outside. So all of that to say, I am back to using the nitrile glove trick. This is also to remind you, if you happen to have your nitrile gloves stored in your garage or somewhere else that's not heated, bring them in the house because they're not going to help keep your hands warm doing this little trick if you're starting with them cold. All right, that's my update on gloves. I think that made sense. I don't know. If not, well, I'm sorry. All right, what else? I am deep into the edits of Peace, Love, and Bacon. Super excited about this book. I have one more pass through to look for typos and words that don't make sense and all that good stuff. And we are getting closer, you guys. I'm really excited to get this book out to you. I hope that you will love it and that you will laugh and be entertained with all the stories of chaos that I have included in this lovely book for you. All right, I think that's all I have for updates. Let's head over to this main topic and talk about the gentle art of being misunderstood. Have you ever made a life choice and someone else in your life hears about it and they just don't get it? They don't understand. They don't know why you're doing it. They don't get it. It could be something big like, hey, I'm 52 years old and I think I'm going to quit my well-paying, stable job and I'm going to go back to school. It could be something like that. Or it could be something less earth-shattering like, actually, I don't think we're going to go to the potluck this weekend. Have you ever done something that then somebody misunderstands your intentions or your reasons, and then because of that, it drags you down into this complicated head game of trying to explain your reasons for why you did what you did or thought what you thought, or maybe it even has you questioning why you did what you did or what you thought. You ever been in that situation? Pretty sure you have. Pretty sure we all have. So today we're going to talk about why it is very freeing and almost even necessary to let go of your need to be understood by everyone. So what's underneath all that? What's at the root kind of the need to be understood? Well, I think human nature, first of all, we have this desire for approval. We want people to like us. We want people to think positively about us. We want them to think positive thoughts about us. We want people to understand what we're doing and approve of what we're doing because we generally want people to like us. And I know some of you right now are thinking, no, Amy, I don't care if people like me. And to that, I will say, okay, maybe, but chances are you have someone in your life that you want to think about you in a certain way. We want people to think about us in a certain way. It could be we want them to believe that we are kind, or we are tough, or we are smart, or we are generous, or we're badass, or we're super sexy, or we are self-sacrificing, or we're the protector, or we are the apathetic lone wolf. Whatever it is, right? We have something we want people to think about us. But the truth is, there's a few truths here. Number one, you're never going to know exactly what people are thinking about you. You're not going to know. And 2, even if you did, you have no control over it. So those are 2 big concepts right there. You're not going to know exactly what people are thinking about you. Even if you did, you don't have any control over what they're thinking about you. Here's a 3rd thing. People are thinking bad things about you all the time. And bad things, I'm saying quote unquote bad things. I want you to think about the person in your life that you love the most, is your favorite person in the whole world, right? Or even a couple people, whatever. Think about the people you love the most. Family, friends, your significant other, your kids. You just adore them, right? But how many of you are like, if my significant other leaves crumbs on the counter one more time, or they leave their shaving mess around the bathroom sink one more time, I'm going to throat punch them. How many of you have someone like that in your life? You adore them. And some of the things they do drive you nuts and you have some negative thoughts. These people you love more than anything in the world, you're still going to have negative thoughts about them, and they will still have negative thoughts about you because you're doing life together and you're human. The person that you love more than anything, that you just adore, might be buying stuff every other day on Amazon, and half of it never even comes out of the boxes. Like, it's taking up an entire room in your house, and they don't even remember what's in the boxes because they've ordered so much stuff. They don't remember everything that's arrived, right? And they just keep ordering stuff, and you kind of want to smash their phone, so they stop ordering stuff from Amazon or wherever they're ordering all this stuff from. And you love them more than anything. But you're like, I'm going to break your fingers if you order something else from Amazon. Maybe that person that you love more than anything in the world, who's your favorite person in the world, is constantly dealing with some health issue. And they complain about this health issue all the time. And yet they are constantly making choices that 100% make this health issue worse. And you kind of want to knock them upside the head. And so maybe you spend time venting to your other friends or other people about this because you're so frustrated. And you say a lot of negative things. But this is your favorite person in the world. This is the person you like the best. And you're still thinking negative thoughts about them. My point here is, how in the world do you think you're going to have people who are further removed from you than that, always thinking positive, uplifting things about you? Or even just correct things about you? You're not. The people you are closest to in the world, you're still thinking negative thoughts about. Everybody thinks negative thoughts about other people. You can't control it. It's part of life. It's doing life. It's being humans. And this whole getting okay with being misunderstood, we don't have to get super heady about this, because I know sometimes this topic becomes just be yourself and don't pay attention to what anyone thinks about it, right? This is more concrete than that. This is a bigger issue than that, because when we do something, we know our motives. When someone misunderstands our motives, that's frustrating. If you helped someone with something for reason A, but you have someone in your life that thinks your actual reason for doing that was reason B or C or D, that can cause issues. If you do something at work for reason A, but a coworker thinks it was for reasons B, C, and D, that can cause issues. If irresponsibility is one of your biggest pet peeves, and someone in your life is doing something that appears to be blatant laziness and irresponsibility when it's actually not, that's going to cause issues. If you want to be healthy and active because you still want to be able to move around in 20 years, but your significant other thinks the reason you want to be healthy and active is because you want to look good to your assistant at work, that can cause issues. Misunderstanding is a little more complicated than, hey, don't worry about what people think about the fact you colored your hair purple. Or, hey, don't worry that people think you're a flake because you read trashy romance novels. Or whatever you want to put in there. Misunderstanding is a little bit more complicated than that, right? So why is it okay to be misunderstood? Why is that okay? Why are we trying to make it okay? Why are we trying to get okay with that, I should say? I think there's a freedom in letting go of it. I think there's a piece that comes from accepting that some people are never going to get it or get what you're doing or understand what you did, and that's okay. And I'm not saying that, that's not from a place of, I'm so great and I'm so enlightened and I'm so beyond what people think of me that I don't care if they understand what I'm doing or not. Because there are people who will come at it like that. And that's not what I'm talking about here. Some people want to say, hey, that's okay if you don't understand. But it's like they're holding a sword behind their back the whole time. The whole time they're saying, like they're saying it, it's so passive aggressive. Like there's all this other stuff sprinkled over it. And they say, it's okay that you don't understand. It's okay that people misunderstood what I was doing, but it's really not okay. And you will know that it's not okay if you spend a lot of time thinking about the fact that they misunderstood what you said or did or intended. That's when we know we're really not okay with it. The truth is, what we think about something is all about perspective. And here's something that's kind of hard to wrap your head around. It's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. Think about that person in your life that you just really struggle with for whatever reason. Maybe you think they're really irresponsible. Maybe you think they're a big jerk. Maybe you're like, oh my gosh, your life choices. Oh my gosh, you're such a loser. Like, I don't know, like whatever it is for you. That person that you can't stand, that you think they're irresponsible or hateful or they're just a big jerk or whatever, that person is someone else's favorite person in the whole world. There is someone out there that thinks that person hangs the moon. They just adore them. That person you can't stand, someone else just adores them. And likewise, that person that you think is really amazing and you really admire them and you think they have such a great way of looking at the world is the same person that someone else cannot stand to hear from. It's the same person that someone else rolls their eyes every time this person opens their mouth. So it's all about perspective. The way we understand things, it's all about our perspective about that person. So how do we get okay with being misunderstood? I think one of the very first things is to know who your explanations are for and who they're not. Because when we discover that someone has misunderstood us, either our intention or what we said or whatever, we feel like we need to explain. We need to justify what we did. Right? Okay, well, no, that's not what I meant, or that's not why I did that, or no, you've got that wrong, right? We've got to defend ourselves. We've got to explain. I think what we need to do here is know who your explanations are for and who they're not, meaning not everyone gets an explanation. Figure out who in your life does get an explanation. Because if you have to explain yourself to every single person, this is why I did what I did, it will drain your energy. It will create massive amounts of anxiety, and it will lead you to be incredibly frustrated. And the other thing is that it's almost like if you have to explain yourself to every single person, this is why I did what I did. This is why I did what I did. No, this is why I did what I did. It's almost like it almost dilutes the choice that you made. It's almost like every time you have to explain it, it ends up watering down what you're doing. And I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I think about it. So when you find yourself in these situations, you need to ask yourself, does this relationship warrant deeper conversation about their misunderstanding, or is the relationship such that I should just let it go or accept that they interpreted my action differently than I intended it? And in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. So it really has to do with finding that boundary of who are the people I'm going to spend the time explaining myself to, and who are the people you just get to misunderstand, and that's fine. Like I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to waste my time on that. And for some reason, when I was making the notes for this episode, it reminded me of a few years back. I'm sure it was close to pandemic time and all that chaos. It didn't have to do with the pandemic, but I know it was in that time. And there were some big things happening in the news, lots of current events happening. And I had a few folks who emailed me, listeners from the podcast, they emailed me, and they were upset that I had not made a comment about the situation that was happening on my podcast. And because I didn't make a comment about those situations on my podcast, they had assumed what I thought about those situations and said I should be really worried that other people would also assume the same things and that could be really bad for my podcast. And initially, that really bothered me. It bothered me that by not responding to the current events that were happening, that people would think one thing about me. And if I did comment on those particular current events, other people might think something totally different about me. And the crazy thing was, it wasn't even anything that had to do with my podcast. It had nothing to do with the topic of my podcast, right? And yet people were assuming things about me because I hadn't at least mentioned it. And I remember having to decide, there are people I will take the time to explain myself to, and there are people I won't. And it comes down to things like, if you are not someone that I've shared a meal with or would realistically share a meal with if given the opportunity, I'm probably not going to take an hour to explain myself to you. If my husband and I have a misunderstanding, am I going to take the time to clear that up? Yeah. That's a totally different thing. My kids, if we have a misunderstanding, my close friends, my close relatives, if we have a misunderstanding, I'm definitely going to clear that up. And you have to know where those boundaries are for you, because you can't spend your whole life explaining yourself. The other thing is, does someone's misunderstanding of what's happening or what you said or what your intention was, whatever, does someone's misunderstanding of that change the path or the outcome of anything that matters? Because sometimes we get real distracted with the fact that somebody didn't understand us or misinterpreted us or thinks differently than we intended for them to think about something. We get all caught up in that. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference either way. So we have to be careful of that. Something else that I think that's important to keep in mind is that when someone misunderstands you or misinterprets something, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're sitting in judgment of you. Sometimes they just lack context or experience to be able to interpret it the way you thought they would. It's not that they don't respect you. It's not that they don't care. It's just that they lack some kind of context or experience with it. And we live in a world today where society wants everyone to understand everyone's experience. Like, if you don't understand someone else's experience, you're just a jerk. And I think it's a really good idea to be aware that other people have had other experiences, but I think mainstream society is going about it a little bit wrong. And that's just a tangent maybe we don't need to go into here. But anyway, sometimes we want to explain ourselves because we are so triggered that we think someone doesn't understand what we're trying to do or what we're trying to say or whatever. And we launch into this huge explanation and the other person doesn't even care. Like, we are so hung up about our choice to homeschool our kids or drink raw milk or vaccinate or not vaccinate or use AI, or whether your significant other and you sleep in the same bed, or whether you're a carnivore or a vegan, or you work outside the home, or if you go to church or whatever. And the other person we're hauling off on this explanation at is like, whoa, settle. Like, they didn't need a dissertation. Because they don't care. They misunderstood you. And then it's like, okay, I didn't need a dissertation. Because, like, actually, I don't care. And it's not I don't care because I'm a jerk. It's I don't care because, okay, you do you. Like, I didn't need a 20-minute explanation here. Whoo, calm down. But sometimes we go there, right? Because we don't want to be misunderstood. I think it's also valid to point out here that there are some folks out there who are committed to misunderstanding you. I do not think this is the norm. I think there are a lot of people out there who want to think it's the norm. I don't think it's the norm, but I do think it happens in some super toxic relationships. And I think sometimes in these situations, we try even harder to make people understand. Like, we just want to win. We want to have them get it, right? But if they are committed to misunderstanding, you kind of miss the point. And that's why you should get even more okay with letting it be okay that they have once again misunderstood you. It's like if you had a chicken that was absolutely committed to laying eggs behind the woodshed. And it doesn't matter how many other awesome places you create for that hen to lay her eggs, she keeps going behind the woodshed. She don't even care. I'm going behind the woodshed. That's where I'm laying my eggs. And you're working yourself crazy trying to give her all these other options. And it never mattered in the first place because she was hell-bent on laying them behind that one tree behind the woodshed. Now, I'm not saying you should put up with other people's crappy treatment of you. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying you can't control other people. And if they are hell-bent on misunderstanding everything you say and do, then that's what they're going to do. And you need to figure out a different way to deal with them. Because stating something 15 different ways to try and make them understand is not going to fix the problem. Something else I think that's worth pointing out here is that being misunderstood is a normal part of life. It's part of being human, but it's also a part of living authentically. When you get to the point where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. I've made these choices. This is how I'm going to live. I'm going to be my best authentic self, or whatever we're calling it these days. People are going to misunderstand that. That's just part of that life. That's part of choosing that path. That's not to say if you don't choose that path that people are always going to understand you. That's not true at all. I'm just saying if you choose to step outside of the norm or the mainstream or whatever you want to call it, that's going to be probably even more common in your experience, is to be misunderstood. And that's just what it is. Be okay with it. It's fine. The flip side of this, the flip side of people misunderstanding you, I mean, because there's always going to be people who will misunderstand you and what you're doing, your motives and your intentions. That's always going to be true. But if we step back a little bit and be honest, there are just as many people that you have misunderstood that you don't even realize. We tend to look at the people we deal with on a daily basis, the people who come into our life, and we see what they do and we see the choices they make, and we think we understand what's going on because we're seeing it from our perspective, and we have a whole story in our head, what happened and why. And if we don't really know, we just fill in the details with assumptions based on all sorts of things, and then we go forward with that understanding. And we assume we're right. But do you know how many times you've been wrong? No, you don't, because we always assume we're right. That's our normal mode of operation. We view the world, this is how we see it, and we're right. But when other people misunderstand us, we're so confused. We're like, what? Like, we are offended that people would misunderstand our motives and our intentions and what we meant and why we did what we did and why we want to make changes or why we don't want to. But we have absolutely done that very same thing to other people. And the majority of time, we're probably never even going to know that we did it. You have to be okay with misunderstanding people because you have absolutely misunderstood other people and you don't even know it. So, little recap here. You do not need to be understood by everyone. And if you are struggling with the misunderstanding someone has had of you, take a minute to ask yourself why. Check out that relationship or that situation to see if it's one that really does warrant you explaining or justifying your actions. And be real about that, because sometimes saying, oh yeah, I need to justify myself, it's really just because you're thinking, yeah, I need to be right. And sometimes your right or wrong doesn't even make a difference to the situation. So check in with that. And if it's not a situation that really warrants your further explanation, take a look inside yourself to figure out why their misunderstanding bothers you so much. Why is it bugging you so much? Dig into that. Misunderstanding is natural, part of human nature, part of just us not knowing how to communicate. And it does not reflect on your value at all. And when you finally embrace it, it can be almost freeing, and it can almost empower you to live more authentically. So maybe this week, when you are going through life and you realize there has been a misunderstanding, I want you to keep everything that you have heard in this podcast episode in mind. And maybe you will be able to let one of those misunderstandings roll off your shoulders. And maybe you won't feel the need to explain yourself or justify yourself, or at least you will take a minute to go, do I need to explain myself here? Do I need to justify myself in this situation? Do I need to? Make a decision there and then move forward. And maybe the best thing to wrap this episode up with is this thought or this quote that I've heard a few times before, and I think it works really well here, which is, what others think of me is none of my business. And that is real crazy, but it is absolutely true. Thank you so much for joining me here at the Farmish Kind of Life podcast. I hope that this gave you something to think about. I greatly appreciate you spending time here with me this week because there is 11 bazillion podcasts out there that you could spend time with, but you keep coming back here to listen to me babble for 20 or 30 minutes a week. Have a great week, you guys, and I will talk to you again soon. Hope you enjoyed the show today. To continue the conversation, visit our website at afarmishkindoflife.com. Find A Farmish Kind of Life on social media or drop me an email at amy@afarmishkindoflife.com. Peace, love, and bacon, y'all. Stay farmish.